I'd be surprised if you were in the tabletop hobby and you didn't play or even hear of Stonemeier's Wingspan. This bird-themed game took the world by storm when it came out, not only for its beautiful art, but its fun mechanics as well. However, Stonemaier now has a sort of new version of the game, combining this very popular Wingspan with one of the most popular mythical creatures, dragons. In Wyrmspan, you'll be using dragon cards instead of bird cards, and while many of the mechanics seem familiar, this is not a simple reskin. This has new mechanics as well as updating some of the ones you used before. But is this enough for it to be a new evolution of the game, or is it nothing but a pale imitator?
The game in this video was not provided to Roll4Crit by its creators or publishers. Roll4Crit was not paid, sponsored, or contacted by the game's creators or publishers to make this video.
To no one's surprise, this borrows a lot from its elder sibling Wingspan. However, there are some major rules changes that make this more than a simple reskin with dragons. On your turn, you're going to have the option to do multiple different actions. Almost all of them will require you to spend coins that you get at the start of each round. Usually you'll gain 6, but of course, in a game like this, you may have more or less depending on what cards you play. The first action you can take is Excavate. That will be using these cave cards and placing them on empty cave spaces. You will start off with one cave space already excavated in each color. This is important as the dragons can only be placed on top of a space that's been excavated. They cannot be placed on an empty space, so they need a cave card there for you to, well, give them a home. The caves come in many different colors. They do not need to match whichever place you want to place them in. However, the first place is free. The next column here requires an extra egg for you to place a cave in there, as well as a cave to the right. And the last one requires 2 eggs in order for you to excavate that spot. Place the cave there, gain whatever rewards are on there, and then you really don't need to worry about them. They're basically now a space that you can now entice a dragon into. Speaking of which, that is our next action. To entice a dragon, once again, pay a coin and the cost on whatever the dragon card has up here. Now, those can be those 4 resources. It is also possible they may cost some eggs, or even for you to spend an extra coin in order to play these dragons onto the board. Now, the dragons can go in one of the 3 areas that are listed here. So, for example, this Rainbow Guardian could go anywhere. However, if I want to entice, let's say, this Southern Mammoth Dragon, it has to go in the purple area. Dragons can have many different abilities. Some trigger them at endgame, some of them when your adventurer goes out, some of them when they are played. So make sure to read the card when you play the card. They also have many different attributes, such as the number of eggs they can have, how many resources, how big they are, if they're aggressive. These are important for the personal goals that we'll talk about at the end of the round. Finally, you can go explore. That will cost 1 coin the first time you go to explore there. So you'd mark it like that. The second time you go to explore there, it'll cost you a coin as well as an egg, with the third time being a coin and 2 eggs. The way it works here, unlike Wingspan, is you're going to place your adventurer on the first space, gain whatever is listed there. Then you'll move on to the next space. Now, let's say that dragon wasn't there, and we move here. If you hit a stop symbol, then you're done. That's all you do. But in this case, you'd go do the dragon, which tells you to tuck a card underneath it when the adventurer arrives onto it. Move to the next space. This symbol means to move around on the guild track. There are many different rewards each time you move, but the important thing is the top and bottom. Each time you hit the top and bottom, you can take one of your cubes and place it on there for a reward. Now, some spaces are limited. So, for example, I can no longer go where it says gain a coin and 2 cave cards, but I could go here, for example, which would give me 6 points at the end of the game. Once again, keep going. If there's nothing printed there, if it doesn't have a stop symbol, you can keep going. Let me draw a card. Here is where I would stop. So I would return to base camp. And those are the 3 main actions. Most of the time, you'll be using those to either trigger off the different symbols. Like I said, that one is moving on the Dragon Guild. There are drawing cards, both dragons and cave cards. There are gaining resources, very rarely, but possible to gain coins. And of course, laying eggs. Sometimes you can keep them over here. Sometimes you may want to lay them on your dragon cards. So plenty of ways, just like Wingspan, for you to gather up cards and try to build a card engine. But at any time, usually because you have no more coins to pay actions left, you can choose to end your turn. And when every player has ended their turn, you're going to trigger end of round abilities. That has the little clock action up there. You can see the round tracker. then you will score for that round. So, for example, this is looking for dragons that have a printed cost from 0 to 2. So right now, this player has 2, and if no one else has more than 2, then of course, you will get the most points for that one. This will continue for the other goals and the other rounds, making sure to mark how well you did until you reach 4 rounds of play. Then you're going to add up all your points, which are going to be the dragon tail wrapped around a number. This can either come from the guild card, the round goals, dragons themselves have points. Of course, there are some endgame abilities may trigger that give you more points. You'll also get points based on eggs on dragons, cached resources such as tucked cards, or if cards allow you to add resources onto cards. Basically, following very similar to Wingspan, a chart, and whoever has the most points is the winner. And as with many Stonemaier games, there is the single player variant. It has its own deck that you can use in order to play this game against the AI. Before we continue, there are 2 things I do want to say first. One is I'm a huge fan of Wingspan. Absolutely love the game, everything about it. There's a reason I think it became so popular, and it definitely is popular with me. The second, if you couldn't guess from, well, my shirt, honestly, just if you've watched me in general, I love dragons. Whether they are robots in Zords here or in Godzilla, or if they're real and they're breathing fire, no matter what element they are, whether they are good, whether they are evil, whether they are neutral. I love dragons, and so does the world. There's a reason they're one of the most popular myths. They're almost just everywhere, so to speak, depending on how you define a dragon. And that's also the fun part. Dragons take so many different forms and sizes. Calling them reptiles is extremely just simple. They can be more bird-like, more mammals. It's just, they have so much to offer. So when I first saw this, I was super excited that they're going to bring that to this game. Now, that is a bit more on the thematics, which I want to get to later, because I think the bigger thing to talk about first is the mechanics, because I think that's the reason this game was actually made. I like Wingspan, like I said, but it has some balancing issues. There are certain cards that are a bit more powerful, and I think there are probably just some strategies that always tend to win when it comes to, especially those who are much more skilled at board games. They probably find it a bit more simple. It's actually one of the funny things about Wingspan. When it comes to people who are immersed in board games, they often consider Wingspan a very lighter game, when those who don't really play a lot of board games consider Wingspan to be an extremely heavy game. It's a very interesting debate on how you view a game when it comes to light and heaviness in terms of rules. But besides that, Wyrmspan seems to be designed taking a look at all the errors that happen in the mechanics of Wingspan and trying to fix them. The first one is going to be looking at the action economy. In Wingspan, you're always going to have 8, 7, 6 actions based on your little action cubes. Here, you sort of do, but your actions are going to be coins. The reason that's different is you just use the cube to really mark that you did an action in Wingspan. Here, you have to spend the coin, meaning it's a resource. So some actions may require you just a coin the first time. Then you also can have to spend a coin for some dragon cards. They could be really powerful, but is it worth it to you right now to lose an extra action to play that dragon? And finally, but rarely, you may be able to earn a coin. And this is really powerful. I mean, any game, anything that gives you more actions or turns is always considered to be an extremely powerful effect. So because of this, not only does it make the action economy much more interesting, it basically gives them a lot more design options to give things that either reward you with actions, which can be really powerful, or cost an action, which better be worth giving up an extra action. So there's a lot more interesting give and take for both the players as well as the designers by making the action something you pay rather than something you just guaranteed to have a specific number of each round. Now, both of them still have the random goals that tell you like reward points based on who has the most of this kind of card or this kind of card. Here, though, there's another element of randomness added to make the game stand out from each other, and that's the guild boards. The guilds are put in the center track that you go around. However, there are multiple guilds you can choose at the start of a game. This means whatever rewards you choose from there can be different, and it's also still a bit of a race there too. So sometimes you're like, oh, I want to move fast because there's only one left of that certain reward and I really want it. So it adds a bit more tension when it's interacting with the other players. They also slow down a bit of what dragons you play in the rows with how you have to excavate the caves. However, in return, you actually get rewards every time you open up a space for a dragon. So now there's a way for you to get, whether it be maybe resources to pay the dragon, or maybe even a coin sometimes. basically ways for you to earn more instead of just trying to quickly fill up a row as fast as possible, because maybe the best strategy is always just to fill up the eggs or the draw cards, whatever it may be. You're going to have to take your time with opening the caves up first before you even think about adding those powerful dragon cards. So mechanically speaking, it feels like they added a lot more here. Yes, it's going to be a little bit heavier than Wingspan, but outside of maybe a little bit confusion of just like which way you go on the rows and stuff, which I think is just something you learn when you play another version of the game. It's not really a miss. I do think a lot of these changes are for the better mechanically. I can see why some of these choices were made, and I can see how they can help out the game. However, on a thematic sense, I do find that Wyrmspan is a bit of a step back when compared to its older sibling. See, one of the reasons people love Wingspan is the look and feel of the game. The art was beautiful, which is important because think of how colorful birds can be. They have bright reds, greens, yellows, blues. And because of that, even when you put them next to a black or white bird, they still stand out. And then, of course, each card had a little dex entry telling where the bird is found, as well as a little bit about the bird itself. And then finally, the rows you put them in are based on the ecology they would live in. If a bird would live more into just the forest area, they can only be played in the top row. If it can be found more on the coastal lines, but also maybe can go a bit inward into more of a plains area, then it can go in the middle or bottom row. So it really brought these birds to life at the table. I can't say the same for Wyrmspan. I have consumed so much, not just with dragons, but other monster media where it really goes into detail of like the myths, where they come from, the origins, what they're inspired by, what if a dragon would be alive, how would it survive in this particular environment? Why would it have these adaptations? So I thought I was going to get that similar feeling in this one, and you don't. The 3 rows here aren't because they're from different environments, different mythologies, different continents. It's just color. There's a red, a yellow, and a purple. And the dragons are color-coded that way as well. The art itself is still beautiful. It's a different artist, but I actually really like that cover dragon. I think that looks really cool. But when you look at them, because they, instead of making like, if they kept like, for example, let's say they still kept a forest, plains, maybe mountains in this case, and water, you could be like, oh, look at all these. This is definitely designed to be a more aquatic dragon. It looks more like an eel or something maybe, or has fins. This one obviously is a bit bulkier. Maybe it's supposed to be in the mountains, that kind of deal. No, it's the colors. And technically the dex entries are in this game. They're just not on the cards. You got a fun little dragon book note here thing, and it's got them on there, but a lot of them feel to be more like the comical flavor text you see on some Magic the Gathering cards, rather than interesting knowledge about the creatures themselves. I'm not grasped that these are real living creatures that we're exploring and inviting into our habitats. Even like the food is milk, gold, gems, and meat. Yes, dragons are known for their treasure lust, but like a dragon is a creature, you could have done like red meat. You could have done one that maybe like herbivore dragons, like milk and I think milk is mostly just for the baby dragons. It really just didn't feel like everything feels like it's glazed over. I'm not picking up things because, I know I'm picking up this kind of creature. I know it's going to eat this way. It just feels like game requires resource 2, gain 2, resource 2 with this. And I just feel a lot of the life that was in Wingspan doesn't appear here. Yes, I do think it does a great job mechanically, and I think it's going to satisfy a lot of people who aren't as happy with Wingspan when it comes to the gameplay. But in terms of the feel and the world, it just doesn't grasp me the same. Crits and misses for Wyrmspan. Crits. The new coin mechanic to keep track of actions is actually extremely clever. You still spend a coin so you know how many actions you have left, but instead of it just simply being a way to track, you now may have to spend more to play specific dragons, and you may be able to earn some coins back. This gives a much more interesting give and take, making the actions a resource rather than simply just the number of turns you have per round. Multiple different guild boards add a whole new mechanic that's not really seen in Wingspan. Not only does this change up how each game's gonna feel with different boards meaning different rewards, but in general, the guild board adds a new way for players to compete against each other, racing for specific rewards, as some places can only hold so many player cubes. A lot of the core mechanics that make Wingspan fun are still here, even with the changes. You still will be collecting up dragons and trying to organize them in a way to program really strong action rows, while also keeping a mind out for the short-term goals of whatever is required for the group goals each round. Misses. Wingspan does an amazing job in trying to capture what these birds actually were, whether it's the dex entries, what the bird specifically ate, what environment they would belong into. And I cannot say the same when it comes to the dragons. The way the dragons are designed are mostly just to say what row they would have fit into. And those rows aren't because of an environment, they're just color-coded red, yellow, and purple. The resource used to entice a dragon felt less like something that they would actually desire and be interested in, more of just discard this number of colored tokens to play this card. The dex entries are included, but all in a separate book rather than being able to read them on the card while you hold them. Overall, I just feel that dragons are a dressing for the game rather than being an integral part of the experience. Truth is, I think that the biggest miss for Wyrmspan is the fact that Wingspan exists. I don't think it's a bad game. In fact, mechanically speaking, I do think it is a little bit better. I think it's really cool, the new things they added, as well as making it a bit more interesting and honestly a bit more excited to see what they do with expansions for the game. However, I think what they move forward ahead, mechanically speaking, doesn't make up for what I felt was lost thematically. Mostly because I don't think a lot of the reasons for the things that they don't have in this game they didn't have to give them up in order to move ahead for all those mechanics. I know I keep saying that I feel Wingspan feels like it brought the cards to life and more real. And I'm sure some people are like, well, yeah, dragons aren't real. They can't do that. I'm like, yeah, but that's actually the opposite. It means they have more wiggle room to what they can do. There's only so many birds they can fit in each region. This bird can't exist in the forests. So it's very hard to decide how to balance certain birds with what region they are and what they do and try to make them thematically fit. Dragons, you can do whatever you want. They could have made the same kind of environments and made it so that, yeah, the bottom of drawing is the water dragons, and we'll make them look like this. Well, we need something that can go both in the water and the mountains. Well, we'll make it design to look like this, and this will explain why. Maybe it travels upstream, like a salmon or something that makes it end up in the mountain region. There's easily more you can do, and just having it be like color-coded, it takes away a lot, and it just doesn't feel as exciting and interesting. And maybe on a mechanical sense, you don't need to have the flavor text, just give them the book, you'll still get it. But to me, that still makes a difference. Yeah, I don't want to have to pass around the book. I want to just see what card I'm holding. I think in the end, if you don't have either of them, it'll come down to a choice. How important our mechanics are to you? If the mechanics make or break a game, and that's all you care about, Wyrmspan, no question. If, though, you are someone who really likes the theme, the feel of the game, that's important to you, I think Wingspan is probably going to match your calling a bit more. But these are just my thoughts for this review. Let me know your thoughts. Odds are you've probably already played Wingspan if you're watching this. And if you've already played Wyrmspan, tell me down below how you think maybe I'm wrong, or maybe you do agree. Maybe you also love Monsters and Dragons and you didn't get that same connection that I feel I get from Wingspan in this version. I'd love to hear everything you guys have to say in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this review. I'm Will, and this has been Roll for Crit.